Okay teachers, what is the worst experience you have had with a student? Or, what is the worst thing you have seen a student do to a teacher? I had a student threaten to shoot me in the middle of class. He's in prison now for shooting someone. A little backstory, the kid didn't actually pull a gun on me in class, but he told me that I was gonna get the Tech 9. I don't think he thought I'd know what that meant. Fast forward 2 years, the kid is involved in a drug deal as the seller, and it occurs to him that if he simply kills the customer after he's made the transaction, he gets the money and the drugs back, you know, GTA style. So the deal goes down, and afterward my former student empties about 6 rounds into the guy's torso. As they're walking away, an accomplice tells him that he should go back and put one in the guy's head just to make sure he's dead. Former student says, "Nah, did you see how many I put into him? He's dead." They leave, and very recently shot guy drags his porous butt over to a payphone and puts former student into the police, and ultimately lives. You really dodged a bullet there. I'm gonna burn you, miss. I'm gonna make you cry. I don't have to do what you say. B. If you don't get out of my way, miss, I'm gonna punch you in the face. And it's only my first year, but I love them anyway. That's what it's like in urban schools. There's something horrifying about them politely calling you miss while threatening you. I grew up in a small town in Kansas where everyone knew everyone's business. In 6th grade, several of my classmates, who happened to be boys, went over to our music teacher's house and spied on her through her windows. Again, at her house, in her private time. She was single, by the way, and probably about 27. They saw her freaking a guy, went and told their parents, who then went to the school board and had her fired for freaking a guy in her own house, in her private time, not at all related to school. That was the worst. I really loved her. She was a fantastic teacher. I'd press charges. When I was 15, my high school Spanish class was taught by a pregnant lady. When she was a few weeks off her maternity leave, a fight broke out in her classroom and she, perhaps pretty stupidly, went over and tried to break it up. She ended up getting full-on punched in the stomach by one of the students who swung at another student and missed. But instead of apologizing, he laughed and told her she shouldn't have got in the way. She was okay though. Took the rest of the week off. Baby was fine, thankfully. Teacher here. It's important to remember that we teach, as a collective group, the future decent lawyers, doctors, firemen, cooks, plumbers, mechanics, janitors, fundraisers, and every other sort of contributing members to society. It's just as important to remember that we teach the future murderers, thieves, rapists, and every other sort of non-contributing or destructive piece of crap in our society. The system is so far beyond broken, too, because of legalized social segregation. It can be rough watching the writing on the wall for so many kids. It can be rough watching the writing on the wall for so many kids. It absolutely breaks my heart. According to my teacher wife, behind every bad student, there's a parent insisting their angel can do nothing wrong. In most cases, yes, I have seen exceptions. I've been called a N, or N, whatever the frick it is. It's pretty unacceptable. I've had a student shoulder bump me in class and start yelling a bunch of crap to my face, saying, "You're pathetic, incompetent, etc." These are college students who don't come to class, don't do HW, get caught cheating, act a fool, and think it's their teacher's fault. Not a teacher, but when I was in high school a student poisoned a teacher. It just gave her a bad case of diarrhea, but it was determined that since she was breastfeeding at the time, that if she wouldn't have been informed this could have put her newborn at serious risk of a fatal poisoning. A couple of years later all her children died in a drunk driving accident caused by their father. Brutal. My little brother, perfectly normal in any other regard, once snuck up behind his kindergarten teacher and bit her in the back of the leg hard enough to draw blood. Oh god, this reminds me of something. My mum has this long brown coat, sort of furry, like Hagrid's coat but not as ugly. Me and my brother were chasing her around Tesco's, a British supermarket, biting her on the ass. Don't ask me why. There happened to be a woman wearing the same coat, and we bit her on the ass. When I was a student teacher for 4th grade, we had a new student that had moved to the school from a really bad part of town and straight up called me Ms. Knockers. I'm a little busty. I was beyond shocked. My students didn't know what it meant, but that kid sure did as he sat there with a little smile on his face. In 12th grade, I once called a student teacher Ms. SI, which was sort of a play on her real name. She was obviously shocked, maybe even a little disgusted, and just went on with the lesson. I don't quite know how it happened. It just sort of popped out. Now I feel even more terrible about it. After reading 1.5 of these stories, I am reminded of why I teach at the college level and would never teach at the high school or lower level. Disciplining is not a part of what I do. Also, this is why I have an immense amount of respect for people who teach in middle high schools. I have so many awesome stories about student-on-student fights. I went to a 5A Texas school where a third of the students were low-income African Americans and a third were rural, overall wearing rednecks. That was the year Obama got elected. Crap went down. Tell. The Ask the Virgin. When I was in 4th grade, a friend of mine learned of the word virgin. He didn't know what it meant per se, but anyway, we were having an English test one day, and in the middle of the most awkward silence ever, he addressed the teacher. "Are you a virgin?" Awkward just became super awkward. After about 30 seconds of the most intense awkwardness I have ever felt, the teacher silently said, "Yes." Had a child who had some serious anger problems. Threatened to kill a girl, one of the nicest girls in the class, and then about a half hour later says, "If I really wanted to kill, I would have killed you already right in front of me too." She has stabbed, pinched, poked, punched, kicked, and spat at every student in the school at least once. Is in the principal's office every day, is very manipulative and sucks up to and distracts any authority figure when she gets caught. It's a good thing she was taken out of the school. Kids were terrified of her. When I was substitute teaching, there was a 6th grader who peeled off some of his scabs. He had tons. They were huge, and put them in my teaching bag when I wasn't looking. That was pretty disgusting. I'm subbing now and I just gagged while reading this. I once had a student whacked out on crack attack me. Before I could defend myself, 4 students jumped him and beat the crap out of him, saving my butt. The administration wanted me to write up the students who defended me, and when I refused they said they'd fire me if I didn't. When I threatened to go to the media with the whole story, they backed off. The student who attacked me was not even disciplined, and about 6 months after he graduated died from some mysterious problem. I sometimes wonder if we had prosecuted if he would be alive today. The reason that they do not discipline the really dangerous kids is because, well, they are dangerous. It is much easier and safer to slam dunk the decent kids when they make minor mistakes or somehow run afoul of school policy. I don't think people understand how often students use crap and pee as a passive-aggressive means to dealing with anger. Every school I've been in has had at least one angry shitter, meaning that the way they react to anger is by crapping, or occasionally pee, themselves. I feel real sorry for these kids who have their parents back them up in their butt hattery. When they get to college, or in the workplace, mommy won't be there to make threats on their behalf. I could either tell stories about my last pre-K position where I had a severely violent student who I had a 3 strikes rule with. He hit me 3 times, usually because I got in the way so he wouldn't hit other students, and he had to go home. Or, when I taught at the prison, and an inmate let me know how Juve school some guy violated his teacher and the rest class either watched or participated, and how easy it would be to do there since the door locked from the inside. A deadbolt. But no one else had a key for some stupid reason. When I was in 10th grade, I had a really cool but nerdy world history teacher. We all liked him a lot, but there was this one kid who usually gave the teacher a hard time. He was a weird, kinda punky kid that no one else really liked. My BF thinks he stole his Game Boy. Unrelated side note. One day my teacher wears this sheerish button-up shirt. For some reason, this kid starts making subtle jokes about how nipply it is in there, and then became more obvious about it. I don't remember if my teacher said anything about it, but I remember he went outside our portable and wasn't coming back in. Someone went outside and found him crying. He came back in a few minutes later and was totally defeated. He refused to teach us and lectured us on how he didn't approve of the kid's behavior. I felt really bad for him, but was unsure about why he hadn't just put the kid in his place. As a female student teacher myself, if a kid made a comment about my appearance in an obscene manner, I would really be a bee about it. I used to be a counselor in a school for kids with behavioral problems. One day a student punched the teacher in the face. I proceeded to move him to the confinement room, empty room with a door, where he grabbed a fistful of my hair and wouldn't let go. Another teacher had to come in and almost break this kid's fingers to get him to let go. I lost so much hair that day. I quit 2 weeks later and have worked in a cushy office job ever since. A bad student will never take away my passion. I don't give 2 cents about those 1 or 2 kids who are out to get teachers and parents who are actively searching for lawsuits. In my school, we know these kids who are teacher eaters on a first name basis and we talk about them at faculty meetings. As a school, we defend ourselves against people who set out to ruin public education and privatize what we do for the nation. I have enough students, parents, businesses in my community that support me and superintendents that love me that I don't have to worry about 1 or 2 kids who hate my class. To all the students who blame teachers for everything including pooping your own chair, watch out. Pee during restroom breaks. Get to know your teachers as human beings and you will be treated as a human being. Public education is always getting antagonized, but I am always pleasantly surprised when a high school graduate from the middle of nowhere becomes an engineer, cancer researcher, lawyer or doctor. Who taught these interesting wealthy people how to read when they were 6? That's right, a bumfrick elementary teacher. Quit putting society's problems on us when all we do is encourage reading and using your brain. We had a girl in my chemistry class that was about to graduate so she didn't give a frick about anything. She told the teacher she was leaving early and he said if she did she'd have to see the principal. She started packing her stuff and he started writing her a pass to the principal. He gave it to her and she ripped it into little pieces and threw it in his face. He tried to stop her from leaving in the hall but she didn't give a frick. This was the worst because he was in the middle of a divorce and a petition was going around school for him to get fired. I think high and even middle school should treat attendances like college. If the student doesn't want to enter a class, it's his problem, and his parents' problems. It's not a daycare center FFS. I agree. I think that every child has a right to not do his work, not to learn, and to fail. Unfortunately schools make it virtually impossible to fail, and thus success has greatly diminished value. Sitting in my science class in 6th grade. Kid just finishes telling off a teacher for something. Doesn't matter. She walks out of the door and is holding onto the door frame with one hand, talking to someone in the hall. Kid gets up and smashes the door into her hand. Blood everywhere. She sues him and gets mega money and quits. Poor girl. There are lots of great human beings speaking here who also happen to be teachers. Let's remember that we pay them enough to buy a new car, never food most of the time if they scrimp, and a home of their own if their spouse has a high paying job in another kind of work. My friend is a high school teacher. She had a very charismatic troublemaker in her class. However, he showed the utmost respect to the teacher and would take it upon himself to silence the class or otherwise when they were being disrespectful. The police came and took him away for running a prostitution ring. He was 15 at the time. I've been physically assaulted twice. First time, knocked over by a flying desk, the kind with a chair attached. The second, a chair slammed on my foot. Broke 3 bones. I've been spat on and called all sorts of names. I have 3 master's degrees. I witnessed this one. A teacher had joined our school. She was quite a quiet person. When she got our class she was terrorized constantly. People filmed her getting annoyed and generally were a bunch of C. Anyhow, when she one day gets us teaching, some B student complains about her being strict. She was only teaching the class. She ended up letting the class riot again after threats of complaints. I saw she had a book on coping with depression, and one time walking past the class I saw her sobbing in the empty class. So yeah. One very difficult student named Lewis unplugged my computer in the middle of a PowerPoint-led lesson. I told him to get out of my classroom and that I was going to phone his mum. He wasn't happy, so he went to the canteen, bought a chicken burger, came back into the classroom and threw it at me. It missed, got mayo all over the place and got permanently excluded. That hardly seems fair, that they excluded the chicken burger. I'm not a teacher, but I went to a school known for violence and drugs. This was a middle school in Pompano Beach, Florida. These are the things that happened while I was there when my mother went there. One teacher had his throat slit by a student. He remained during my time there, with a large scar from ear to ear. I watched a student try to attack the lunch lady with a knife. He failed. Her knife was bigger. Nobody was hurt. Was involved in an argument with a substitute who was rudely calling me a dyke for my at the time short hair. One student later crap on his windshield. Guess he fricked with a lot of us. One girl accused our math teacher of debauchery to get out of a test. One student was so upset with them having him arrested for selling coke on campus that, at a school dance, he urinated in the teacher's lounge, mostly the fridge. At an entirely different middle school I was transferred to, one student threatened a teacher with an unloaded handgun. He was expelled and moved to New York, became a Marine. Good times. My best bully story. I was the nerd of the school, also the geek of the school, but that's irrelevant to the story, and everyone knew I was the one to cheat off of during tests. My math class had an entire system planned out. The guy to my left would cheat off of me, and he would pass my answers to the guy to his left and etc, and my answers would zigzag through the class. Well, about 2 months into the semester I was tired of taking everyone's tests, so I decided to mark down the wrong answers to all my test questions. Naturally everyone else copied my answers. I turned in my test, quietly told the teacher what I was planning, and he said it would be okay, and about 5 minutes later everyone else had finished copying my answer and turned in their tests. The teacher went on with the day and started a new lecture. After the class was over I lagged behind and continued with my plan. Retake the test with the correct answers. After about 10-15 minutes I was finished and I turned it in again. Next day the entire class made a 0, while I made an A, and as I predicted the guy to my left was a complete moron. After the teacher said he was grossly disappointed in the class and was astonished that I was the only person to get a single answer right. The guy next to me said, but I had all the answers that my anonymous name had. May I say it? Busted. No one in the school dared to copy off me ever again. Student to teacher here. I was a TAFE for my favorite teacher during my senior year, and he let me do my homework, read a book, or whatever I wanted to, as long as I had entered the grades in the computer and taken roll, among other things. It was a great setup. In another class, someone who sat with me was failing the class and asked me if I could help him out by boosting his grades for $20. I said no at first, but he badgered me so much saying his parents would kill him, that I finally relented. Over the next month or two, I raised his grades up assignment by assignment so that he went from a C to a B+ in the class, all without attracting attention from Mr. Howard. I felt like crap for doing it, but I was young and dumb and kept doing it. After he got his semester report card and saw his grade he was ecstatic and said he would pay me. Weeks passed and he never did, so I asked him when I would get my money. Finally he got mad and said he wouldn't pay me, so I said, fine, then I change your grades back. He said he would rat me out, and I believed him. So, I decided to come forward and confess to Mr. Hoffman first. He was the coolest teacher ever, and as it hit me how much I betrayed him, I was crushed by my stupidity. But I did it anyway. I pulled him aside after school got out and confessed to him. I'll never forget his face when he said, but I trusted you completely. It was awful. He said he would have to alert my parents, the parents of the kid, and have a conference with the administration. A few days went by and he wouldn't let me do the grades anymore. I understood, but I also couldn't look him in the eye. I wondered why I hadn't heard from my folks about it, and I realized after a week that he hadn't notified anyone. Nor did he. He confronted the kid, who confessed, and adjusted his grade. He also told the kid that if his folks asked, he would have to explain the grade drop to his own parents. After 2 weeks, he gave me back the records and grading discs and told me to do what I did before, and that he would be checking on my work. I thanked him and did my best work ever for the rest of the semester. Sadly, it changed our relationship, and he never really trusted me again, but he knew I had messed up and that it took guts to confess. When I realized what he had done at the end of the year, I thanked him profusely and said to remember what happened and to really value trust and honesty. To this day, I hold both values very highly and I know it shows. Mr. Hoffman was a man. I should look him up. I'm not a teacher, but I used to work as a sort of counselor at a cadet summer camp. My job was basically to assume responsibility for about 30, 15-year-old kids at 6 in the morning and shepherd them through the day around an active military base. I was responsible for taking them to meals, classes, sports activities and back to their compound at night. The compound where all the cadets stayed housed about 500 kids at any one time in long trailers. Each trailer housed about 40 kids in rooms with 2 bunk beds each. There was a separate group of staff responsible for the compound, but there wasn't much to do there for the kids and so needless to say it would take the entire armed forces to keep them from acting up. My particular group of kids were pretty good during the day. They would get rowdy during long classes and other activities, but considering we were expecting a group of teenagers to basically follow a military lifestyle for several weeks, they were fairly well behaved, or so I thought. Kids would become different animals in that compound at night. Literally everything you could think of was an issue at some point or another. We had violent kids attack the staff and other cadets. Kids defecate and urinate any way you can imagine. There was physical shaming and abuse galore. But the worst thing I had to deal with was easily one of the kids in my group, at night, ejaculating into another cadet's face while he slept. I don't really know what drives a person to do something like that. I guess a mixture of stupidity, adolescence, carnal experimentation and the rigors of such a rigid environment will drive a person to do some weird things. But man, that was really something. The only thing that made the job easier was that we basically had express consent from these kids' parents to subject the kids to discipline as per military guidelines. Having a kid hauled away by military police can be surprisingly refreshing. Anyway, always thought about doing an AMA about this. Any interest? I have horrible experiences almost daily. Here is an example of something very common that happened recently. Backstory. Our administrators have requested that we do not give out any passes unless a kid is bleeding or puking. Basically, the nurse even comes to you so the kids don't have to leave. The kids need to go to the bathroom between classes. This is basically to try to prevent fighting in the halls. Our hall passes are also a huge pain to fill out because they require tons of detail. This means lost teaching time, albeit only a couple of minutes, but our classes are only 45 minutes long. Every minute counts. I tell you this in an attempt to prevent your teacher on a power trip. Just let them be comments, although I know I'll probably still get some. So anyway, I told my students they get one bathroom pass a month and they all agreed. Anytime a student requests to use a bathroom I make sure they understand that it needs to be an emergency because it's their one pass per month. I had a student use her pass on the first day of the month. I repeated what I always do. It's your one pass. Are you sure you want to use it today? She said yes and went. The next day she asks to use the phone and I say sure and go on teaching. Most kids need to use the phone to let their parents know they've got a detention or something. A minute later, she interrupts me saying her mom wants to talk to me. Turns out the little wench called her mom and told her I was refusing to let her go to the restroom and was scared she was going to pee in front of the class. Keep in mind she had never asked that day. The mom proceeds to ream me out on the phone and threaten to have me fired and sue me, etc. I have no idea what the heck she is talking about at this point but eventually figure it out. She had told her daughter if after the phone call I didn't let her go, to walk out and go straight to the administrator. I had no choice but to let her go at that point. I asked her why she lied to her mom and she just said I knew if I asked you would say no since I used my pass yesterday. Now you can never say no again. TLDR. Student calls mom in middle of class to lie and try to get me fired. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye 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 bye.